My job as a therapist is to sit with people who pay me money in the interest of changing and improving the parts of themselves that they don't like, that they feel don't serve them anymore, and they feel are unhelpful, unproductive, and getting in the way of them being their optimal self. And so when I see these parts in question emerge in the therapeutic space, my job, what I'm paid to do, is interrogate those parts in the hope that if we can have a conversation with these different parts of the self, expose them to the light, if it were, they might become more manageable or even more diminished for the individual in question, and that individual will experience an enhanced sense of well-being going forward because they will feel less subjected to these less desirable parts of themselves. Now, I think that's a pretty reasonable, broad understanding of therapy and the intention and motivation of it. The paradox emerges, though, in the chair when I notice these parts of the self emerging, and I'll poke at them or ask them a question or comment on the contradiction between one part and the other. Clients / people will invariably employ Freudian defense mechanisms in order to defend the very parts of themselves that they're paying me to help change. I just want to say that again. People will employ defense mechanisms to defend the very parts of themselves that they are paying me to help them change. We are a strange fucking species, aren't we? That's such a strange thing to do, yet it is completely universal. And not even to the context of therapy. I could be having coffee with a good friend, and there's a part of me I know I'd benefit from changing, interrogating, taking less seriously. And my very good friend might poke that part as a gesture of goodwill and as a sign of collegiality. And rather than saying, thanks for pointing out the part of me that I am currently working on, you've reminded me not to take that part too seriously and to do my best to distance that part of my personality so that it doesn't influence how I go through my day. But do I do that? No, I fucking don't. I employ some kind of defense mechanism to defend the very part of me that I wish didn't exist that my friend just exposed. Again, we are very complicated creatures. Am I the same self that has this self-determination, yet employs self-preservation in the interest of selfishness? Are they all the same self? The same self that's self-aware is also the same self that engages in self-deception. The same self that has large amounts of self-efficacy can also have very low self-worth. The same self that has self-belief can have a fundamental lack of self-mastery. There's all these different parts of us, and yet we insist on viewing ourselves as this collective, coherent identity and personality. And when people point out that there's inconsistencies in different parts of us emerging, rather than accepting that that's just the reality of being human, we instead try to defend these parts because of the discomfort it causes us when inconsistencies are pointed out. Yet people will freely say, oh, look, I'm a different person at work than I am on the weekends. So by our own admission, we are different people depending on who we're with, depending on where we are, depending on the task that we've been entrusted to undertake, depending on how much we've drunk, depending on how much we've eaten, depending on how much we've slept. We are far more the product of our environment and the food and liquids we consume than we are this isolated, intact, coherent, consistent self. So the question remains, why would we take ourselves so seriously?